Yon, magandang gabi, magandang hapon, magandang umaga mga kameta. Kamusta naman kayo dyan? Medyo kailangan natin magpahinga kanina. As you can see, medyo may konting lagnat lang with the very hectic schedule over the past week. Driving here, driving there, hatid sundo. My goodness, grabe, traffic Baguio, traffic Manila, kaya medyo nabigla tayo, no? Na-overwhelm tayo. Now, katulad ng minention natin kanina sa ating page, pag-usapan natin today some of the latest developments dito sa ating bansa, and also a very important issue na medyo malapit rin sa puso natin, dahil sa aking palagay, napakamahalaga ito para magkaroon tayo ng isang inclusive democracy. No? At ito yung issue ng affordable housing. No? Malaking problema yan sa Pilipinas. And of course, medyo nag-resurface itong issue na yan in light of yung statement by Senator Cynthia Villar. Muntik na ako Nancy Villar. Ayan naman tayo eh. Uh, Ayun na ako. So ito yung statement kanina. I'm quoting this from Philippine Daily Inquirer, no? Kung saan we are also a columnist. Ito po yung quote from Senator Villar. Ayon sa kanya, hindi pwede yung socialized housing sa Las Piñas. Of course, this is an area that she's very familiar with. Dahil nga daw napakamahal ang lupa, no? So ayon sa kanila, of course, you know the background of the Villiers, their the strong involvement they have in many key sectors of the economy. So of course, medyo poignant yung kanyang statements na yan. So ito po yung sinabi na, I just want to be accurate about this. So I'm quoting per Philippine Daily Inquirer. Ayon sa kanya, walang magtatayo ng socialized housing sa Las Piñas kasi ang mahal-mahal ng lupa dito. Hindi nga makabili dito yung mga can't afford to buy houses. Alright, I don't know what that's supposed to mean, pero yun po yung kanyang statements after discovering that the socialized housing project is set to rise in Las Piñas City. No? So ito yung, at of course, siya ay nakatira dito, dyan sa Las Piñas. At sinabi niya yung mga people from, underprivileged backgrounds, etc., baka mahirapan na maka-afford ng mga bahay dyan, among others. So ito, I'm just reading it. We're being very accurate about this. And para sa akin, of course, this strikes at the heart of a very fundamental issue dito sa Pilipinas, which is the fact that based on some of the older numbers and data we saw, no, up to a third, no, ng Metro Manila are living in conditions that are similar to slum-like conditions. So some talagang slum talaga, corrugated, yung mga metal kung ano nilagay para magkaroon ng bahay. And then a big number of Filipino families dito sa mga malalaking syudad sa Metro Manila, among others, ay nakatira doon sa informal housing or informal sector. So some of the numbers I saw, guys, is up to one-third. And for me, ito ay isa sa pinakamalaking skandalo sa ating demokrasya. Why should millions of Filipinos not be able to afford proper housing? Hindi kasalanan ng taong bayanan. That's a reflection of a fundamental inequality sa ating sistema and a more foundational failure doon sa ating gobyerno na makapag-provide ng proper socialized housing, affordable housing sa mga taong bayan. Kasi alam natin, guys, pagdating sa dignidad ng isang tao, kasama po dyan yung right to food, to shelter, di ba? Yung right to shelter, a dignified shelter po ay napakamahalaga yan. Dahil kung dignified po yung inyong neighborhood, dignified po yung shelter, you have your human rights, your human dignity protected, you can ensure better law and order, you can create a better environment doon para sa inyong kalusugan, para sa paglaki ng mga kabataan. You know what I'm saying? So socializing for me, or affordable housing, to use a much more neutral term for me, is in many ways a fundamental obligation of the government to ensure that. So on one hand, ang pwedeng gagawin ng gobyerno, mga kameta, is mag-provide siya ng subsidized houses, no? Whereby the government will shoulder some of the cost para yung mga taong bayan, especially mga ating mga kapatid from more indigent background, less privileged communities, ay pwede magkaroon ng access to housing. The other way is for the government to also ensure na hindi magkakaroon ng land grabbing, no? Especially by big conglomerates who could turn or who have been turning allegedly a lot of prime property in big areas in big cities into essentially what sociologist, a good friend of mine, Kenneth Cardenas, called cash crop condominiums. No? So ito po yung article by by Kenneth Cardenas. I think he's done already with his PhD sa Canada. So he has been, so he took his master's in United Kingdom, I think in Manchester, on urban sociology. No? So yung issue ng urban planning ay malaking bagay na hindi binibigay ng sapat na attention dito sa Pilipinas. But I think it's a fundamental weakness and deficit dito sa ating democracy or whatever you want to call it. Now, what's interesting is that if you look at one of the countries that a lot of Filipinos look up to, especially yung mga ka-unity, yung mga ka-ano, is Singapore. And one of the interesting things to know about Singapore is that what made Singapore a pretty progressive place is the fact that an average Singaporean not only has good access to education, basic infrastructure, etc., but also lives in a good environment kung saan makapag-aral sila, makapaglaki sila ng pamilya, etc. And a lot of that is thanks to the effort of former Singaporean Prime Minister and of course former Singaporean governments to provide yung tinatawag na socialized housing. So Singapore was never a kind of a straightforward capitalist swashbuckling finance center that it projects itself to be. In fact, at the very beginning when Singapore was emerging as an independent state and kind of like an addendum of an emerging independent Federation of Malaysia and then later on fully independent state, one of the things that they really focused on was para na sisiguraduhin na yung average Singaporeans, right, can live a dignified life. So you can make a criticism of Singapore and say that yung Singapore is, you can say that, well, political freedoms are nowhere close to what you have in liberal democracies, press freedom is nowhere close to what you have even in countries like the Philippines or Indonesia. Yes, you can make those criticisms, but in terms of democratic, economic democracy or socio-economic rights, if you look at Singapore, it has accomplished a lot of its basic obligations to its people. In fact, you could argue that even China, which is totally not a free democratic country, and to a certain degree, even Vietnam, which is not a totally free democratic country at all, right? Even there, they have ensured the basic socioeconomic rights ng kanilang mga mamamayan. And one of the ways by which they did was either land reforms to make sure that the landed elite don't dominate the economy. And the other thing is also sinisigurado nila na may socialized housing. So, now, mahalaga yan because there was one presidential candidate in particular and, we got to talk to him, etc. We'll go back to him. So, ito po, So, ito yung public housing sa Singapore. You can just Google it yourself. So, dito sa ilalim ng public housing sa Singapore, housing units are sold on a 99-year leasehold to applicants who meet certain income, citizenship, and property ownership requirements. No? So, the government will... So, ito, naka-isang century na po tayo. Isang, a whole 100 years of public housing project. No? Projects tayo dito sa Singapore. So, I really suggest you guys, you check this article on The Conversation. The good thing at least about Singapore is that, housing, proper shelter is treated as a social, not a financial asset. All right, this is a very good article by John Bryson of University of Birmingham. I want you guys to check. So yung mga iniidolang Singapore, sinasabi napakagandang Singapore, napakagandang buhay na Singapore, dahil disiplina, blah, blah, blah. One of the things people tend to forget is that one of the things that makes Singapore also a very productive, prolific country, a stable country, a very law and order country is that an average Singaporean has access to all basic things that make life, livable and sometimes life, meeting its greatest potentials. At kaya nga kasama dyan. So for instance, in Singapore, after its own version of Brexit in 1965, nung pinaalis sila actually, you cannot call it really Brexit, but they were kicked out of Malaysia. So in 1960, the Singapore Housing and Development Board, HDB, was formed to provide affordable and high-quality housing for residents of this tiny city-state. I'm reading from this article by Professor Bryson. Today, more than 80% of Singapore's 5.4 million residents living in housing provided by this development board, the Singapore Housing and Development Board, HDB. No? So sa ilalim ng board na yan, binibigyan ng mga ordinary citizens 99 years leaseholds. And the value of the home depends on the inherent utility value of the property, yung size niya, type niya, location niya, with financing readily available, including that provided by the Central Provident Fund, CPF. So ito ay kasama sa kanilang social security system, which enables working class Singaporean citizens and those with permanent resident status to set aside some funds for retirement. No, so you can see here, guys, some of the countries that we really in. So this is, for instance, the Pinnacle, an example of recent high-quality public housing in Singapore. Tingnan naman, napakaganda yung public housing nila sa Singapore, right? Ito ay halos katulad ng mga parang medyo pa luxury condominiums na binibenta sa Pilipinas na napakamahal. In fact, did you know that Manila is now the second most expensive capital in entire Southeast Asia? And and the thing is, we know that this is really, really difficult sa karamihan ng ating kababayan, while a few big companies and conglomerates have been really juicing this out. Now, just to give you an idea how much of a money-making scheme this real estate cash crop business is. So this is the graph that we have from the article by Kenneth Cardenas. So this shows you guys the top conglomerates in the country. So this blue and green shows you their overall revenue. The yellow one, as a share of their overall, it shows your net profit. So if you look at it, area where they get a lot of net profit, this yellow zone, the fourth sector, bulk of their net profit is actually from development of condominiums, right? So real estate actually is a relatively small share of their total revenues. So the green out of the blue. Blue is the total revenue. Green is the share of total revenue, right? You can see that, right? But look at the share of real estate profits out of their total profits. Look at how big it is. So kunyari dito, barely 1/4 yung revenue for one big conglomerate, but the net profit they're getting out of that small quarter investment, for instance, a few years ago, is almost 3/4. So you can see how big of a cash crop business this is, guys. So don't worry, guys. Ipopost ko yan sa baba. So again, this is an article by sociologist Kenneth Cardenas. This is a long time ago. This was written actually 8 years ago. So now the situation is probably even more interesting. So the title is Cash Crop Condominiums, right? Pakicheck yan. This is really fascinating, guys. So you can see how few conglomerates have been making these condominiums, getting the land very cheap, getting cheap loans, financing, and then building these condominiums and then selling that with huge profits, with really, really huge profits. Now, yung mga ibang katulad natin, makaka-afford pa rin ng mga condominiums na yan kahit medyo ang laki ng... Ito again look at it. This is the share of total business ng sa real estate. This is the share of total profits. I mean, the return rates are just so high. It's just so profitable to get into the real estate. Especially, over time, we see that a lot of these conglomerates are moving to real estate in the higher-end sectors. In fact, base dun sa mga research ko, my own independent research, of course, medyo zadi na tayo. Kailangan natin may alam tayo dito sa buhay, sa mga ganyang bagay, mga properties, mga kotse, mga ganun. One of the things I realized that actually marami guys dito sa mga nag-invest dito, marami mga condominiums na kumikita increasingly yung mga more high-end, yung mga middle and high level. Ay nako, Red Fernando, okay, I was sick and all. Sige, pansin mo pa yung natin dyan. Talagang mga walang ya. Okay, mamaya na tayo dyan. Okay, so obviously now, the situation is a bit different kasi medyo saturated yung lower end of the condominium business. But the luxury level, upper middle income level, let's say $200,000 above, still the profit margins are extremely healthy and nice. Now, what does it mean? It means that a lot of conglomerates have been making a lot of big profits, guys, as the numbers show you here, right? But that also means that marami sa ating kababayan are essentially crowded out of na-crowd out sila dun sa property markets. Because let's say 5 million pesos property, let's say a one-bedroom, studio somewhere not so posh, right? Maybe affordable for OFW friends, maybe affordable for some of our friends as their third property, as their just investment property for some yuppies. But marami sa ating kababayan, affording a 5 million pesos, 40 square meters, etc., that is relatively close to areas where they can work, that's just beyond the pale. I mean, that's just too expensive for them, right? So, kaya nga guys, mahalaga na meron tayong aggressive government investment in socialized housing. Katulad ng ginawa ng Singapore na pinag-usapan natin. And Singapore has been doing that for a very long time. So they have been putting aside the Central Provident Fund. They have this board, the Singapore Housing and Development Board, has helped 80%. I mean, it has ensured that 80% of Singaporeans, have proper housing. I mean, Singapore is very, very expensive, but at least vast majority of Singaporeans have their own property. And a lot of this public housing are actually pretty nice. They're pretty nice, no? So, yun lang. Yun lang sinasabi natin, guys, dito. Yes, medyo nag-overwork tayo. Don't worry, I will not talk too much kasi meron pa akong talk later 8 p.m. Sa US naman, ukol sa sitwasyon sa Asia about democracy, populism, strategic issues. So, I'm not gonna be super daldal. As you can see, eto na, warm water lang. As in, parang mga lola style. Umiinom lang tayo ng hot water. But, you see guys, I really want us to pay also attention to this issue. So kahapon, kung nakinig kayo sa atin, we were very much guys focused into the issue of education, right? But now I think this issue of affordable housing is very important. Now, of course, some are mentioning in the comments, meron naman tayong pag-ibig fund, etc. But guys, let's just be very, very honest, guys. Let's just be very, very honest, guys. No, gaano ka widespread yung access? What kind of properties are being provided dun sa mga ating kababayan na from indigent communities, etc. May mga nag-correction sa akin. It looks like my numbers were actually a few years old. My numbers are 2018, 2019, some of the numbers I'm using. So may nagsabi dito, studio unit na 24 square meter man lang ay now running at 5 million pesos. So, okay. So it's even worse than what I was saying based on the numbers I had from my own research back in 2018, 2019, etc. When I was going around and checking different options, etc. across Manila, no? So, medyo nagamay natin yung presyo, no? So, come on, guys. I mean, 25, 30 square meters, I mean, it's barely, and what? And 5 million pesos, that's very expensive. That's $100,000, guys, almost, no? That's very, very expensive. Punta ka sa some places in the US with $200,000, makakuha ka ng buong bahay pa and lupa pa and all, di ba? So, Manila is very expensive, and one big reason is, as people like Kenneth Cardenas and other sociologists have been arguing, is that because nagkaroon ng cash crop condominium business, so a lot of these accessible lands have been dominated by few conglomerates, and then the turnover profits are really, really high, but you're pushing out, crowding out. Ayan, mukhang may nagalit yata sa atin, May hindi natuwa dito sa natin dyan. Okay, may nag-cut sana. Okay. I have to go in also dun sa next talk ko. Now, don't worry guys, babalikan natin yan. By the way, I'm thinking about setting up, kasi cellphone ang ginagamit ko na, setting up on laptop, etc. Medyo sensitive kasi ako sa download ng mga ibang software. So I have to find a way, if I can find an affordable laptop na I can use to download all sorts of stuff. Kasi, of course, I have security concerns, etc. So, I just don't download anything. Maraming app meron dyan na pwede more interactive between us, and I can project mga data, etc. for better discussions. So, don't worry guys, medyo ayusin natin yan. I'll focus. I'm working on that, alright? Medyo mag-iipon tayo para makakuha tayo ng affordable laptop where I can download everything without worrying for my data and privacy, etc. So, medyo I'll work on that. Now, going back to this issue, in fairness naman, there's some leaders in the Philippines who learned some good lessons, no? And one of them is, you can say whatever you want, but one of them is actually former Mayor Isko Moreno at yung ginawa niyang condominium na project. Now, as I said, maybe it's just one project, maybe we have to still watch and see, saan ito papunta. Pero ito, if you look at it, itong condominium project na yan, no, na ginawa sa Maynila, the other year, in fairness naman guys, tignan niyo naman yung effort, diba? At one of the things I really liked during my discussions with Mayor Isko back in the year was, he said, galing siya sa hirap at nakita niya na gaano kamahalaga na magkaroon ka ng magandang bahay, or at least yung decenteng, dignified na bahay na pwede mo uwian, at you feel safe and it's clean, and you can raise your kids and family, you can rest, you can recuperate, etc. At yung experience niya sa kahirapan, yung na-experience na, growing up in the slums, the indignities he was exposed to, the difficulties, etc., that instilled in him in a sense of compassion and all. And pinakita niya, hindi naman mayaman ng Manila. Yung revenues ng Manila, no much yan sa QC, no much yan sa Makati, etc. But, di ba, nakapagtapos sila ng itong condominium, no, which provides a very, very, at least so far, no, very, very affordable and at the same time very dignified. In fact, quite nice and fancy um, location dun sa ating mga kababayan. No? So, and of course, for me, this should be just the beginning. Hindi dapat ito lang tapos white elephant project. This should be the beginning, guys. We have to have a situation whereby hindi lang dito, but dito, lahat na yan ay affordable sa socialized housing. Hindi yung sobrang magarang, hindi yung sobrang next level na kagandahan or luxury, ganon. But at least the basic dignity of people is there. Andun yung tamang electricity, andun yung tamang tubig, andun yung, just some small rooms so that the kids don't have to all sleep in one place. You can have a quiet place in the corner when you can study, when you can focus, when you can develop yourself. I don't know if you want to do yoga, etc. So lahat na guys, lahat na yan, kailangan gawin na yan. Now, as you can see, one of the other problems we have had is that back in the day, during the Marcos era, we had a governor of Metro Manila, but clearly that was not very effective in terms of creating a efficient public housing, efficient, kung magaling tayo, di sana 70s, 80s pa lang, gumawa na tayo ng underground metro. O wala eh, daming corruption, daming kalokohan nangyari. Baksak na yung Philippine economy by 1982. But a part of me feels sana magkaroon tayo ng governor for entire Metro Manila. And then the governor, together with the national government, coordinates, guys, no, a kind of a socialized housing in good locations in the city para yung mga ating mga kababayan na, they're not as privileged, they will be subsidized and they'll be helped to have a house. Kasi ito ano naman na Silve, bibigyan mo sila ng housing, pero ang layo, 3 hours away from Manila, 2 hours away from Manila. Yung pagko-commute pa lang nila dito sa trabaho nila sa Manila, how much it will cost them? Location matters, guys. So, when you give socialized housing, it has to be also in location na malapit doon sa pinagtatrabahuan ng ating mga mayan at saka mga ating mga kapatid, di ba? Kung malayo yan, wala rin Silve yan, di ba? So, it has to be close there. That's why nga, may mga criticism dyan na a lot of high quality lands in good locations, they were not sequestered for public housing and socialized housing. And that if you leave this to the private sector, they'll treat this like a crash crop. And it was a crash crop until recently. If you look at the profit margins that I just showed you a while ago, base dun sa pag-aaral ng ginawa ng mga academics like Mr. Cardenas, for instance. No? So yun lang. Kaya please guys, when you elect a leader, right, tignan nyo naman kung may appreciation siya ng mga ganitong bagay. Kung meron siyang understanding of best practices around the world. Meron siyang natutunan from other countries in ways that he can apply here na feasible, na pwede talaga tumulong sa ating taong bayan. Para sa akin, Manila will never be a beautiful city again as it was back in the day, Perlas del Oriente, if we don't provide affordable housing to the vast majority of ating kababayan. You can build all the beautiful BGCs and Makatis and Ayalas and Ortigas and whatever here, all the nice malls. We have like 3 Shangri-La Hotel. Fine, go ahead, do all of that. But if millions ng ating kababayan, they don't even have a decent housing, a dignified place to live in, then may malaking problema, may malaking pagkakulang talaga dito sa ating gobyerno, sa ating sistema, sa ating demokrasya. And I think as much as, of course, we have to respect, we have to, we are not, we are a capitalist system after all, right? So profit matters. That is why the state has to step in sometimes, because if you leave it to the private sector, they're driven by profit. So we have to be, and this is where I think we can learn something from Singapore, which is, again, I'm not a fan of Singapore on so many levels, but on this level, Singapore has treated housing as a social, not a financial issue, as a dignity issue, as a political right issue, not as a financial profit issue, right? That's a very important thing. And if you look at a lot of countries around the world, socialized housing is the norm, from eastern parts of Germany, right, all the way to big parts of the Middle East, all the way to even China, Vietnam. A lot of our neighbors, democratic, communist, non-democratic, authoritarian, a lot of them have at socialist housing. Even in the UK, there has been a lot of socialist housing. Now, not all of them turned out very well. There are many problems with socialist housing and affordable. Yes, but the point is not providing it is way worse, right? Way worse. Because you have millions of your citizens not having the dignified shelter they deserve. And the right to food, safety, and shelter, these are fundamental human rights that any government has to provide. Now, may sinabi si Isko the other year when I talked to him, he said something like, there are politicians out there, without naming names, who want to keep people poor and dependent. Because as long as they keep people poor and dependent, they can exploit them, they can manipulate them. Kaya kailangan mo i-empower yung mga taong bayan, etc. Now, as I said, you may have whatever political point of view on our political figures, but my point is I completely agree with that point, right? I agree with the point that we have to make sure na ma-empower yung ating mga kabayan. They vote, they make life decisions not from a position of desperation, but from a position of dignity, from the position of social empowerment, from a position of where they can make the best decisions as adults. All right? So yun lang. Dignified, affordable housing. Kayang-kaya yan if the government has the right policy. Hindi yung tokenistic na bibigyan kayo ng bahay to just some few people and then 2 hours away from, ligay ko niya sa Bulacan, pero sila nagtatrabaho sila dito sa Cubao, for instance. Eh, ang hirap nun. Paano sila babalik? Diba? Eh, yung gastos lang nila to go back and forth is more expensive na dun sa kikitain nila sa isang araw. It doesn't make sense. That's not affordable housing. Affordable housing is also about location. Ito po ay dapat malapit dun sa working places ng mga tao na tinutulungan po natin. Diba? Kaya yung kagandahan ng condominium, yung mga nandyan, nagtatrabaho din sila dyan, malapit dyan. Diba? Dapat ganoon, diba? And if Manila can do that, and consider Manila is not a very rich city in terms of per capita revenues, then kayang-kaya ng ibang syudad yan. But we need to prioritize it. We have to pressure our governments to do it. Alright? Okay, thank you very much. Ito na, alam niyo na, kailangan ko rin magpahinga, but I have another talk, so I have to reserve my energy. I know usually I'm more all over the place with energy and all, but I just felt, this is it's a pulsating issue, no? Kasi, ako, lumaki yung Baguio, diba? Sa Baguio, at least yung panahon na lumaki ako, wala kami mga slums ganun masyado. We had some friends who were more privileged, medyo mas magandang bahay. May had friends who had more humble, houses, etc. And then kami yung mga nasa gitna, middle class, diba? Kaya nung pumunta ako Maynila, naglumuwas ng Maynila, I was not impressed. I was shocked. I was like horrified, right? So you meet your relatives, let's say, kasi ako, nung kabataan pa lang, may relatives ako sa Makati, right? I mean, Ayala area, I won't say where, but one of the posh areas. So I go there, it's like, wow, in fairness, maganda Manila. And then we have relatives, for instance, in a slum area, and then I go there and say, like, what? This is a totally different world. Like, how can these two coexist? Of course, we know why and how it coexists. Pero hindi ko nasikmura yan eh. And until now, medyo tumanda na tayo, tatay fuego na, zaddy fuego na tayo. A part of me always feels strange. Now, why should millions of Filipinos live in conditions that are not in consonance with our idea of a dignified shelter? The Filipino people deserve the best. Or at the very least, they deserve a decent housing. It really is shocking to me to see some of the people in this country living like kings and queens, etc. Wag na tayo mag-name drop. And then you just go out there, 500 meters out there, and then you see like, how is this possible? Right? Medyo may pagka-slumdog millionaire level na. Although, hindi tayo level ng Mumbai. Kasi sa parang Mumbai, India, may billionaire nga gumawa ng bahay, ng pinakamalaking bahay sa gitna ng slum area. Hindi naman tayo ganon. May pagka semi-apartheid naman situation na meron tayo sa Pilipinas, whereby you have these gated communities of the wealthy, etc., keeping everyone out, etc. But, come on, guys. How can we respect our own country? How can Manila can ever be beautiful when millions ng ating kababayan are not having a dignified housing that they definitely deserve? They work from 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. every day. I mean, tignan mo yung mga kababayan natin. And yet, at best, they can get affordable housing 2 hours away, like in Bulacan or somewhere else. Come on, guys. That's not affordable housing. And then sasabihin ng iba dyan, ay, mahal lang dito, wag na kayo ganun. And then we have some of the conglomerates now, they're totally moving out of the lower cost condominium, yung mga 500,000, 1 million. They're moving up to the high-end luxury ones because mas malaki yung profit margins dyan. So they spend, let's say, 10 million pesos on building that property, etc. On average, they sell it at $1 million. $1 million. I mean, their condominiums in BGC and all, you look at the prices, like 2-3 bedrooms are easily $1 million. Right? And $1 million condominiums in a country whereby millions live in informal housing is, to be honest, scandalous. It's scandalous inequality. And it's a big, big slap on the face of our democratic aspirations or pretensions, whatever you look at. And what I'm saying here, guys, has nothing to do with any specific administration. Ito po ay pagkakulang ng iba't ibang administration over time. At I have yet to see a single administration really focusing on this issue. One person I saw really giving a lot of attention to is Isko Moreno, in fairness to the guy, right? But the condominium should just be the beginning. It should not be end all be all. Yun lang. Alright. Salamat guys. Ito na, humihina naman ako. Let me thank you guys again. Thank you so much dun sa mga nagbigay na support sa akin, nakinig sa atin. I hope na hindi tayo masyadong whiny, tiny. One second lang, babalik lang ako. Ayan, kasi Ilocano, work ethic tayo. Kahit unwell, sige lang, trabaho lang, go lang tayo. It's like workaholic talaga eh. Tapos yung Chinese style work ethic din ng lola natin, nakuha talaga natin yan. If I don't work a day, I go crazy. I'm saying, but at least kanya medyo nagpahinga tayo ng konti. So, thank you guys for listening to me despite the fact that I'm not at my 100%. Hopefully by tomorrow, I'll feel better. Inabuso natin sarili natin eh. Halos walang tulog, trabaho, drive, tuloy. Caught up with us. So we'll try to rest. Thank you very much kay Mitch Tengcho for your kind comments as always. And yeah. Tama yan. Yeah, exactly. Yung commute, no? You know, there was a time na nakita ko yung mga tao naglalakad na lang sa EDSA. Kasi maaga ako lumabas, mga 5, 6 a.m. Nakita, naglalakad lang mga tao sa EDSA. I mean, diba? Kasi for some people, it has become so expensive. Diba? Yung commuting pala is very expensive. So we have, one of the big issues we have talaga here is dignified public affordable housing. Martes Romero, thank you very much for your support. Sarah, shopping free. Thank you for that. Azorich Boscano, Prof, upgrade na ako, hindi na team free. Ayan, yan ang mga salamat kay Azurich. Oo naman, konting ano lang naman, support na naman, appreciate natin. Thank you rin kay Braf Pete. Yeah, conducive housing is better kung ikay ay nag-aaral at nagtatrabaho. Exactly, guys. So, related din yan dun sa education crisis na sabi natin kahapon. No? Junior Daxa, thank you very much for your support. Arwin Rubio, Ma'am Jocelyn, thank you so much for your support and your concern and prayers as always. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you kay Ma'am Eunice Babalcon. Isa siya sa mga una nagsusupport parati sa atin. Thank you very much. Ganun din kay Riz Ani. Good evening po. Kay Ma Victoria Baltazar. Kay Fenny San Miguel. Thank you very much, ma'am, as always. Kay Glenn Gupio. Ito rin, hindi na siya team late ngayon. Team, ano na siya? Team live. Sa ating kapatid, wassalamualaikum kay Bibo Nagi joining us from Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. Thank you kay Michael Uy. Okay, salamat guys for joining us. Don't worry, I'll be posting the numbers and all. I have another talk right now, so I have to economize my energy, but I'll try to get back to you guys, and hopefully by tomorrow we feel better so that more energy level tayo. But tignan mo, mahal na mahal ko talaga kayo. Hindi ako nag-meta para may kulang tayo sa araw. Alright? Thank you very much. God bless and have a good evening.